the National Guard, that internal security minister
Itamar
Itamar Ben-Gvir, thank you, has proposed quite some time ago. Nothing seems to be happening with regards to creating this National Guard, which does not yet exist. Why is this not happening?
It's been recognized that one of the potential fronts in this multi-front war will be on the interior of our borders, whether it's in the mixed cities, whether it's in the defense of our strategic sites, or whether it's on our lines of communication. Those are the three areas that people are concerned about internally. Let me repeat that. Strategic sites, lines of communication, and mixed cities. So the problem
by mixed cities, you should simply explain to those who perhaps did not understand, you're referring to cities which are populated by both Jews and Arabs.
Both. Cities
such as Lod,
Ramle,
etc.
Jaffa, Akko, cities like Yerushalayim, places like this.
Jerusalem,
okay.
Yes.
Jerusalem. Okay. So the problem was known. The solution, on the other hand, was not. So there were many people that started talking about, and General Brick was one of them. But Itamar was one of the main, Ben-Gvir was one of the main ones that was articulating a need for what's called a National Guard. I don't call it a National Guard. I call it a territorial defense force. The problem was, even though the need for such a force was recognized, the control of this force was the sticky part. And Itamar wanted this force to be controlled by the National Security Ministry, and the army wouldn't have this at all, and certainly the police wouldn't have this at all. Everybody started jockeying for control. Well, you're taking our money away. You're taking our control away. And then they got personal by saying, well, Itamar is a fascist and he just wants to kill all Arabs. Well, here's the problem. In the event that this internal front erupts, you cannot use conventional policing methods to contain it. Police are not trained to kill. Soldiers are. Now,
in theory, at least in theory.
At least in theory. In the event this internal front materializes, the threat to the supply of our armies, to our source of electricity, to our clean water, our sewage treatment, to our mixed cities, our survival in mixed cities, are not going to depend on policing methods. They are going to depend on militarily trained individuals to shoot, to kill in large numbers. This is not something that you train somebody with policing methods to do. You have to have people that understand they're going to have to pull the trigger to kill, because that's the only way you can suppress this kind of uprising quickly without it spinning out of control. Itamar has done his best to get this force up and running. And who has been opposing it? Bibi Netanyahu. For whatever reason he has, and for the same reason he and his fellow travelers in the military and police forces and the security forces, security services, have undermined, sabotaged, and generally wrecked his effort to get more firearms into the hands of Jews. If you are not going to stand up the kind of force that I just mentioned, and we're looking at over 100,000 people, both men and women, then you need to more fully arm the Jewish community so they can maybe take care of themselves. Now, poll was just run asking the Arab community, are you intimidated or made uncomfortable or scared by the rising number of Jewish gun owners? And the answer was amazing. The answer was no. And why should they be? Unlike the Arabs, we're not going around, just murdering innocent Arabs, Israeli citizens, or anybody in the territories for that matter. So they don't have a problem with that. They're apparently, according to the polls, looking for stability. And if you have a well-armed Jewish community that also knows, that is well-trained, that knows how to use an individual firearm, and on top of that, a National Guard, if you will, they're satisfied because the lid will be kept on this boiling pot. If it boils over because there aren't enough Jews that can defend themselves with firearms, and we don't have a National Guard that can protect our strategic sites and our lines of communication and our mixed cities, everybody is going to suffer. It will be horrific. The number of guns right now, look, Itamar also identified another problem, and this is gun violence in the Arab community. Gun violence. He came up
directed at fellow Arabs. It should be made clear.
For now, no,
most of the time, up to this
correct.
point, yes,
correct. And his point is the same guns that are killing Arabs in internecine or criminal type operations, shakedown operations, blackmail operation, can also be used against Jews, and we saw it during this last mixed cities violence. Okay,
a couple of years ago.
So his approach to this is, we're going to go in village by village, town by town, and we're going to go house to house with dogs if necessary. Guns, powder sniffing dogs, whatever.
Gun sniffing dogs, yes.
Yeah, and gunshot residue cloths.
If Netanyahu was serious, then surely that would have been one of the first things he would have initiated after forming this present government.
As you pointed out, well, I put it in a different way. I said he's past his stale date.
Past his use by date. I said
Yeah,
he's part of the problem.
Used by date.
He's part of the problem.
He is. If before this problem had occurred, he had permitted a wider distribution, a wider ownership of guns by the Jewish community, if he had allowed Ben Gvir to stand up a National Guard or Territorial Defense Force or whatever you want to call it, and if he had allowed the kind of house by house look at the gun, an attempt, not look, but it's a cleanup job of the gun problem in the Arab community, we would actually, despite October 7th, be in a very good position internally. We can't fight an external war and an internal war at the same time. It doesn't work. So on all three grounds, Netanyahu has failed miserably. The gun ownership right now, look, without going into details, Itamar's operation for gun registration has just been sabotaged by a guy by the name of Herskowitz in the government, a little troll, if there ever were one. And what's happened was, instead of maybe 1,000 a day being approved gun licenses, there may be 6 or 7 now being approved, because the individuals that Ben Gvir was using were not acceptable. The national service girls were not acceptable. Really? They're just checking boxes. They're just going through a bureaucratic checklist. That's all. A trained, anybody coming in off the street could do it. So why not the national service girls? They're contributing dramatically to the internal security of the state by doing this. That it's really good work for the state. And the Jewish community is being well armed.
Who is this? Who is this Hershkovitz?
This I call him a troll that basically works for Bibi, and this guy should be removed.
What is his position?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say.
He's a bureaucrat. He's a bureaucrat.
He's a bureaucrat. He's one of these faceless bureaucrats with a stamp and power. And Bibi has basically given him the writ to throw a spanner in the works in terms of
in other words, it's one more example of that which we see historically and at the present time around the world, that the bureaucracy overtakes democracy.
Correct.
Bureaucrats run the country.
Correct. So on this issue alone, the man does not deserve to be Rosh HaMemshala. With one stroke of his pen, he could allow the Jewish community to be effectively armed, could protect the mixed cities and the strategic sites and the lines of communications, lines of supply, and at the same time, stop the violence in the Arab community that will affect us most assuredly.